All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Brett?
Yeah, here.
Mrs. Fields?
Here.
Mr. Hyden?
Here.
Here.
Mr. Nuss?
Here.
Mrs. Manzan?
Here.
Mrs. Steele? Here. Mrs. Stahl?
Here.
Mrs. Whitty?
Yes.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Can you join me in a flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies in which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Sussex Wantage Regional School District Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the school building, and notice of said meeting sent to the New Jersey Herald and the Star Ledger.
The Sussex Wantage Regional School District is a responsive, caring, child-centered community. Our mission is to educate each individual to become a competent learner, lifelong learner, and productive, responsible citizen by providing challenging opportunities in a safe environment through a partnership of families, schools, and communities.
At this point, we'll move on to the report of the superintendent of schools.
Just want to point out there's a modification to our board meeting process today. This is the first board meeting where we initiated videotaping. So if you're at the podium speaking or a member of the board, you are being videotaped. I'd like to begin by inviting Mr. Schwartz up for a presentation of students of the month.
Good evening, Mr. Gall, Mr. D'Agostino, members of the Board of Education, and members of our audience tonight. It is with great pride that I stand before you tonight to present the Students of the Month. Every month I have a pleasure of meeting with each of these individuals, and during these meetings I am able to gain insights into their hobbies, favorite subjects, and extracurricular activities they participate in. Each of these students tonight have been highly recommended by their teachers. Tonight, as I introduce you to each student, I will provide a brief snapshot of the wonderful accolades that have helped them earn the Student of the Month. In 6th grade this month, the recipient is Danny Maselli. When I sat with Danny, he told me that his favorite class was gym. He explained that he enjoys the social aspect of the class and staying physically active. Danny indicated that the game called All for All is his favorite activity. When Danny gets older, he would like to be an engineer. He said that he has always enjoyed architecture and is looking forward to his tech class during the 4th marking period, where he can explore this field even further. In talking with Danny, I am confident that this young man will be successful as he pursues this career. In Danny's free time, he enjoys wrestling, playing travel soccer, and is looking forward to joining the SMS track team this year. It is important to note that Danny recently concluded his wrestling season with a first-place victory in the final tournament of the season. Danny's teacher stated the following: Danny is a high-achieving, diligent, and cooperative student who enjoys participating in class. He is friendly and kind towards everyone. Danny stands up for what is right and demonstrates leadership beyond his years. It is with great pride that I introduce Danny as the 6th grade student. This month, the recipient is Cade Marcus. When I sat with Cade, he told me that his favorite class were gym and science. Like Danny, Cade indicated that he enjoys the physical and social aspect of gym class. With regards to science, Cade enjoys studying environment and life sciences, something that he has always been fond of with his passion for being outdoors and in nature. Cade indicated that he has always enjoyed the studying of dinosaurs. While many see this fascination dwindle, Cade has only seen it grown and would like to become a paleontologist someday. Outside of school, Cade enjoys football. He indicated that he looks to continue playing the sport in high school when he moves on in a couple of years. Cade also loves to draw and make things. In particular, Cade indicated that he enjoys the STEAM courses where he can oftentimes embrace both aspects. Here at SMS, Cade has been a part of the SMS track team, the academic bowl team, and the art club. All of which are very different activities, but activities that he is able to enjoy the company of friends while participating in his passions. Cade's teacher stated the following: Cade is a hardworking, conscientious student who has a great sense of humor and is generous to others and helpful to all of his teachers. It is with great pride that I introduce Cade's seventh grade. In 8th grade this month, the recipient is Evan Worrell. When I sat with Evan, he told me that his favorite class was mathematics. Evan indicated that he has grown in confidence with this subject area this year and enjoys all that he is learning. Evan has a natural ability as an actor and looks forward to performing in this year's SMS musical, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Evan indicated to me that he enjoys comedic roles and has played several characters throughout his middle school career. As Evan moves on to High Point next year, he is looking forward to participating in their fall play and spring musicals. Beyond high school, Evan indicated that theater is something that he will be pursuing as a major. Outside of theater, Evan also enjoys baseball, where he is a part of the recreational team from Sussex. He is excited for the season to start and looks forward to the potential of pursuing this sport in high school as well. Evan's teacher stated the following: Evan has shown tremendous growth in all of his academic endeavors. He is a team player in group assignments and brings a positive attitude into the classroom every day. Despite having the lead role in the play and staying after school every day for it, he is still on top of his daily assignments. As we say goodbye to Evan at the end of the year, I can say that he has had a tremendous impact on his teachers and peers along the way, and he will shortly be missed. It is with great pride that I introduce Evan as the 8th grade student.
As always, folks, we encourage everybody to stay for the board meeting. We love it when you're here. If you choose not to, now is the opportune time to depart.
Don't feel bad.
So I just want to highlight a few things that came out of our committee process this month. It's been a short period of time, short window of time, but we did have a professional development day. Our staff participated in wellness-based activities throughout the afternoon. It was a huge success. Things like mindfulness in the classroom, de-stress, gentle yoga, abstract art therapy, digital diet. Mr. Higgins provided a PD on that. Advice from some dietitians associated with ShopRite. We want to thank them for coming out. Worked on some of our focus period implementation at Wantage School and set design at Sussex Middle School. We encourage you to come out for the play in the future. It's always a remarkable event here. Our policy committee meeting just met right before the board meeting, and we have 2 second readings on the agenda for consideration. In the area of buildings and grounds, again, there's a short window of time. But one of the things I wanted to highlight for the kids, I've been going around doing these Let's Talk meetings, so meeting with various groups of staff. And a couple weeks ago, I met with a group of middle schoolers, and they gave me a lot of different feedback. So one of the things we had planned for them was there was a water fountain outside of Mr. Schwar's, Mr. Linsky's office. We're having that replaced with one of those fancy bottle filling stations that I think the kids are going to enjoy. School security. If you don't know, Mr. Gregory's in the back of the room. He's the principal of Wantage Elementary School. He's also our designated safety and security officer. Has been coordinating a number of meetings and drills for us. And I won't release too many details, but if your children come home and talk about different things happening during drills, one of the things we've been trying to do is take the normalcy and the routine out of the drilling process, just to throw kind of curveballs in there, you know, block and exit for a fire drill, so it gets your mind thinking as to what, you know, you should do to accommodate that. In the area of finance, the Budget and Finance Committee, as well as all the Board of Education members, have been meeting consistently with Mrs. Riker, the business administrator, and I over the past month or so to put together a tentative budget taking into consideration a reduction in state aid. While staffing is anticipated to be impacted, the board has worked diligently to try to maximize the use of every tax dollar in the most effective way. We are submitting the tentative budget for the 2019-2020 school year that includes adjustments for the use of banked cap in the amount of $382,840. A meeting will be held at Sussex Middle School here in the Media Center, May 1st, 2019 at 7 p.m. for the purpose of conducting a public hearing on the budget for next year, and that's where I'll do a presentation along with Mrs. Riker on all the detail-oriented aspects of it. Thank you.
Mr. Gall. At this point, we'll move on to audience remarks. Members of the audience are invited to make brief comments about items on this agenda and matters of interest to the district. Please state your name for the record.
Bill Gedler, 98 Gimmer Road, Wantage. Well, I guess they would be more I intend to cover. People can't afford the taxes. After noting that Warren County is reducing the tax level, the county freeholders announced a $1.75 million increase, which they've now backed off about $40 million, so about one again. Your meeting isn't competing with last night's meeting, but it was announced that your High Point is increasing $280,000. Now, if my numbers are correct, you're increasing over $800,000. You can't afford it. This year, Branchville and Wantage are in a hot seat. We're going to see the maximum tax increases. I'd like to say something good. Sussex Borough's probably going to see a tax reduction, a good, healthy tax reduction. Lunchtime today, I finally got the numbers from Trenton. Our student percentage of the taxes for this school are increasing just about 2%. Sussex Boroughs is going down just about 2%. How many people are you going to chase out of Wantage? I'm also told Wantage is going to have a tax increase. 4 tax increases. I don't know what Wantage is. Presentation I wanted to make tonight. I'm respectfully requesting this board not adopt on second reading the transgender student policy if this board approved by a split vote on first reading and your February board meeting. The Sussex Wantage board fails to correct its transgender policies, and I hope that someone will initiate a constitutional suit against this board. If I had the money, I would initiate the suit. Even though I'm not an attorney, thank God for that, I am submitting to you a proposed transgender student policy for your consideration, hopefully adoption. Transgender student policy. The direct Declaration of Independence is adopted by Congress on July 4, 1776. Reads in part, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. No, this doesn't mean we're all equal. Obviously, we can't all be Einstein. But what it does mean is that we all have equal rights. No one has superior rights, no one has lesser rights. The The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution reads in part, "The right of the people shall be to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, effects against unreasonable searches, seizures, shall not be violated." The Ninth Amendment reads, "The enumeration in this Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people." The 14th Amendment reads in part, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States." Article 1, Paragraph 1 of the New Jersey State Constitution reads, "All persons are by nature free and independent, and have certain and unalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life, liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and of pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness." Therefore, a transgender student shall be guaranteed the same identical rights as every other student is guaranteed. No more, no less. A human's gender is established in embryonic fetus long before the fetus is born. Fetus's bone structure, muscles, and organs were all based on the embryo's fetus's gender that was established at conception. A person may undergo cosmetic surgery, but they will never change their body's true gender. Therefore, for all, that's all, of the school matters and functions, each student's gender, including the transgender students, shall be the student's gender as recorded on the student's original birth certificate. This shall include any overnight field trip accommodation. Every female student athlete has a right to know that every student that she is competing against also has a bone and muscle structure of the female gender. Every male student athlete has a right to know that every student that he is competing against also has a bone and muscular structure of the male gender. Every female student entering a girl's restroom, locker room, etc. has the right to know that everyone using that facility is also of the female gender. Every male student entering a boy's restroom, locker room, etc. has a right to know that everyone using that facility is also of the male gender. If the specific school building has an existing, quote, gender neutral, unquote, slash, quote, unisex, unquote, restroom, locker room, etc., then any student, including the transgender students, who feels uncomfortable using the facilities assigned to their gender, shall have the right to request that they be allowed to use the, quote, gender neutral, unquote, slash, quote, unisex, unquote, facility. A person's legal name is the name they are given at birth and which is recorded on their birth certificate. Therefore, all students, including for transgender students, all school records shall use the student's legal name as recorded on the student's original birth certificate, unless a judge from a court that has legal authority has granted an order legally changing the student's name. The school is not the student's parent or legal guardian. Therefore, the school must immediately contact the students, including transgender students, parents, or legal guardians concerning any matters relating to the student. No school official or employee is to keep any information concerning a student confidential from the student's parents or legal guardian. One apparent exception to this, I believe, under existing law, that if a school official or employee are told by the student that his or her parent or legal guardian are abusing the student, or if the school official and or employee see signs of abuse of the student, the school official and or employee are required to notify the proper legal authorities. That's the end of the proposed. Bottom line, as far as I know, under our Constitution, a school cannot take away a student's rights by granting super rights to another student. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Getler.
Good evening. My name is Diana Whitehead, and I've lived in Wantage my entire life. I am here to support the updated transgender policy, which is a roadmap for districts to follow the New Jersey law against discrimination discrimination for providing transgender students with a safe and supportive learning environment that is free from discrimination, harassment, and to provide the counseling for students in need. I wonder how many of you in this room have actually talked to someone who is transgender. I'm sure not many. I have a transgender child in my family, and I've had the pleasure to talk with and to get to know many more. I understand firsthand the struggles they have and the courage it takes to come out and be who they are. You know who they talk to first? They're going to talk to their school friends for support and for the courage to then go talk to the parents. Yes, some do go to their parents first, but they are all scared no matter what, no matter how strong their relationship is with their parents. They see the horror stories on how other kids are mistreated and disowned by their families. Hateful online posts by people, bigoted people, who do not have any knowledge or experience with transgender. With so many examples of this negativity in the media, how can we not support the child's privacy in this matter? At least the school can help counsel them so they can move forward, possibly to have that discussion with their parents. And if, God forbid, the parent disowns their child, then the child knows their school is a safe place and they can go to them for help. We can hope that every parent in this situation chooses to love and support their child, but we know from the news and the homeless LGBTQ statistics, that isn't the case. This is an opportunity for this district to show they stand for all of their students and to abide by the law and to support the courageous children who just want to be true to themselves. It's time to do the right thing and pass this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ford.
Hello, Lisa Van Orden, SWEA president. Just wanted to give you an update on some activities that we've held. At the Lawrence School, we have Love of Reading Night. It was a carnival theme this year, and it was organized by our very own Jen G, and it was a huge success. We had about 93 families attend with about 140 children. This was definitely our night at CEL to shine, and it would not be done without the help of all of our staff volunteers that we had. Mrs. Palucci said, actually every parent stopped by to talk to her about how amazing the decorations were and the storytellers, how creative they were. And we used about $800 from our SWEA Pride grant written by Carol Speck and Kim Walsh. We donated markers and colored pencils for everybody, for the kids to leave with that night. And a big thank you to the PTO for addition of pizza that night, so the parents didn't have to rush around. They could have pizza with their kids before the activity, so it's very busy at the end of the day to attend the event. So a big thank you to the PTO. Thank you.
Barrow, Florida, Greenville Road, Wantage, New Jersey. I'd like to talk tonight about both the existing and proposed transgender policies. I want to start by saying that I found it embarrassing that the proposed policy was even voted on at all during the last meeting. It was obvious that there was serious confusion amongst all board members as to the content and legality of what is included in this new policy. There were many questions regarding what is law and what is guidance within the policy. You as board members have a very important responsibility when it comes to making decisions. You were elected into your positions because the voting public had faith that you would do your job responsibly and with dignity and respect for all. How do you vote on a policy that you clearly do not understand? How much time was actually spent discussing this policy before the last meeting? Was the board attorney involved with any of these discussions, or does he just show up the night of a meeting at protocol? I don't know how many of you board members have children or have children that are in this district. I, as a parent of 3 children, one of which is currently in the district, and 2 more on the way, maybe. I'm absolutely appalled at the lack of thought and time and effort that appears, anyway, to have been put into evaluating and understanding this proposed policy before the last meeting. These are our children that are affected by this policy and the decisions that you board members routinely make. I can't even begin to explain how offended I felt after leaving here after the last meeting, thinking to myself that apparently my kids are not valued enough by this board to warrant taking the time to understand this policy and the implications of this policy before bringing it to the table for a vote. I do respect the fact that several board members were not comfortable with voting yes because they didn't understand the policy. There were questions that still needed to be answered. I just don't understand how something that's this important for everyone, for all of our children, gets to the table for a vote and there's still so many questions left to be answered. So I'm left questioning the ability at this point of this board to communicate and work together and get the questions answered that need to be answered before things are being voted on. Maybe it's because the policy is being viewed as just a formality required by law. The comment was made last meeting that the school districts, every school district is doing it. It isn't our policy, we didn't create it, it's what the state is recommending we do. How responsible is it to simply adopt the policy because everyone else is doing it, or because an authoritative power told us we should do it? Don't you remember the old saying parents used to use when we were all children, just to say to us, just because everyone jumps off a bridge doesn't mean you have to do it also. Parents need to be informed and involved when it comes to important decisions like this. Most parents that I've talked to aren't even aware that there's an old policy and a new policy, or that new policy is being voted on. There needs to be outreach from the school district inviting parents to information sessions. The state issued guidance says that parents were involved in the process of creating the recommended guidance along with other people. My question is, how many parents? Were they parents of both transgender and non-transgender children? What demographic were they from? My question to this board and to the administration is, why can't we, the parents of the children being affected by this policy, have input? Sure, there will be differing opinions and conflicting views. Yes, this is a very sensitive subject and it will be a difficult process, but we all have a right to be heard. After all, it's our children and our families that are affected by this. As it stands now, it feels like this district and this board are trying to remove the parents from the equation. The proposal allows our minor children, to make life-altering decisions without having to even notify their parents. These children are minors, not even old enough to drive a car, and this proposal is allowing them to change their name and gender identity without having to even involve their parents. I can't possibly imagine how anyone could be okay with this. As a parent, these are our children, not your children, they're our children, for the other parents in here. This policy goes on to state that the school will be responsible for educating our children with regard to proper LGBTQ terminology and meaning. Are parents going to be involved with this, or are we going to be left to figure out for ourselves what's being taught and how it's being taught? I'm mortified for the day that my son, or one of my sons, or my daughter asks me a question regarding transgender. How do I thoroughly explain something that I honestly, thoroughly don't understand myself? As a parent, I need to know what exactly is being taught so that I can be there to help my child when the questions are asked. There needs to be consistency, and parents need to be involved. Parents also need to feel as though they can voice their concerns and ask their questions without feeling as though they will be labeled a bigot or accused of discrimination. This is a huge issue with parents that I've spoken to. We all have the right to be heard and to voice our opinions as long as we do so respectfully. Standing in the way of this by way of intimidation and accusations is a clear violation of any person's rights. I do agree that there needs to be a policy regarding transgender issues. I'm not a bigot or one to discriminate. I believe we all have rights. My concern, though, is that when a policy is created, we need to be aware of the implications and how they will affect everyone. When I read the proposed policy, I'm left feeling that the non-transgender students are not being considered. What about their civil rights? Just this morning, I read an article out of nearby Honesdale, Pennsylvania. A transgender female student was getting changed in a female locker room facility in her high school. A non-transgender female student was getting changed in a female locker room facility in her high school when she heard a male's voice. She turned around, looked up, and to her dismay saw a transgender male who identified as being a female standing there looking at her while she was getting dressed. She's now claiming a civil rights violation and that she was subjected to sexual harassment. A complaint has been filed by her attorney with the U.S. Department of Education Civil Rights Division. I think this is a prime example and points out a serious problem with the laws and policies that are in place. Everyone's civil rights need to be considered, not just those of one particular group. I acknowledge there's not an easy solution, but clearly the existing proposed solution and laws are not a solution at all. I'm asking this board and this administration to vote no on this proposed policy. Parents need to be involved and the facts need to be accurately explained. Once everything's on the table and everyone has had a chance to be heard, this board, the administration, the policy writers, and the attorneys need to collaborate on what's best for everyone involved. Voting yes on this policy would simply be a complete failure of what you were all elected to do as a school board. Please make the right decision.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about the 8th grade trip. I was on the fence about coming up and talking about it, because multiple people told me that it will never change, it's been like this for years. Well, I think it's time to talk about it, and I think things need to change. Mr. D'Agostino, I have a couple of questions, I don't know if you have the answers to them or not. How much money is budgeted annually for the cost of the class trip? Does anyone know? Or?
I can field that. So, the Washington DC trip this year is anticipated to cost each student $425. If it weren't for the fundraising folks, which I've been very appreciative over time, it would approximately be $500. When we look to budget as a school district for the Washington DC trip, it encompasses a number of things. One is paying for students who are on free reduced lunch. There's some ancillary costs like teacher stipends, faculty staff stipends to go on the trip.
Right.
Substitute fees for staying back on the trip. So when we put all of those things together, I'm comfortable giving you an approximate range of about $18,000 to $20,000.
Just for one trip, the 8th grade trip. And how many students are in a hotel room based on?
Yeah, I believe it's 2 or 4.
2 or 4. Okay. And are there chaperones in the room with the students?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, okay. And I'm assuming that these hotel doors lock, because most hotel doors lock, correct? I mean, that's safe to say? Yeah. Okay, just wondering. Besides the obvious fact this trip costs a significant amount of money paid by the school system, there are other glaring concerns. First off, the implementation of the existing transgender policy and how it could potentially have dangerous consequences with respect to the room assignments. There's also a more general issue of putting 4 13, 14-year-old children in a room together, unsupervised, overnight. They are minors. There are obvious reasons why hotel rooms or hotels do not allow children of this age to stay in a hotel room without an adult. The number of potential issues that could occur given this situation are endless. I'm not going to point them out, use your imagination and your common sense. It is a wonder to this point that there has not been serious problems resulting in litigations against the school district. To clarify, I'm not saying to not have an 8th grade trip, but I do not feel that it should include an unsupervised overnight stay in a hotel. I'm a taxpayer and a mother, and I hope that each member of this board and administration realizes the potential velocity of the situation and give a long, hard thought at how the funds allocated to this trip could otherwise be spent in a safer, more practical manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Brazelhoff. I'm a parent. I live in Vernon. I'm an advocate for LGBTQ youth, and I work throughout the county, the state, and across the country, educating and supporting families, doing professional development for educators and school staff, helping to train service providers, walking with and engaging faith communities, and pretty much anything else that helps protect and support LGBTQ young people. I'm here to speak in regards to the transgender policy. First off, I do think it's important to know that districts around the county and the state are indeed going through this process of updating their policies right now to be in alignment with the New Jersey Department of Education guidance on transgender students in accordance with the law. This guidance, required by a law signed by Governor Chris Christie in July 2017, was written with the input of educators, counselors, school psychologists, advocates, attorneys, and parents, and it was released in October 2018. Second, the guidance takes a student-centered approach. It is about the best interest of the student. Transgender students are at increased risk for depression and anxiety, which leads to poor social and academic outcomes. The single most mitigating factor for those risks is support. Every major medical association in the United States has come out in favor of affirming a youth's sexual orientation and/or gender identity. I have a very long list that I'm not going to read for y'all, but I could give you the list of all these organizations. Teacher associations, including but not limited to the American Federation of Teachers, the American School Counselor Association, the American School Health Association, and the National Education Association, have also come out in favor of supporting trans students by accepting and affirming their identities. Finally, there is ample data about the importance of family acceptance and improved mental health outcomes. A 2016 study published in the AAP journal Pediatrics found that socially transitioned transgender children who are supported in their gender identity have developmentally normative levels of depression and only minimal elevations in anxiety. So basically, all those risks of depression and anxiety go away with support. It's not because there's something wrong with these kids, it's because they're not getting what they need. But what happens when a family doesn't support their child? What happens when a child isn't safe and affirmed at home? LGBTQ youth face extremely high rates of family rejection and abandonment, which again leads to high rates of depression and anxiety. When schools forcibly out children to their families as routine action, these students are put in the precarious position of choosing between living authentically at school or potentially being punished or harmed at home. Of course, as educators, advocates, parents, and community members, the goal is to have parents involved. We want to work collaboratively in the best interest of the student. The goal of this policy is not to keep parents out of the conversation, it's to protect students. Ideally, the district can be a support to the student and to the family, but routinely outing a child without conversation, care, and consent is irresponsible, unsafe, and simply illegal. If a child is not supported at home, a situation we all hope and wish would never happen, but unfortunately it does, it is up to the school to create a safe school environment for that student. And in the end, better supported kids mean healthier kids, which means better school attendance, better grades, and improved test scores. And that's a win all around as far as I'm concerned. I'm deeply grateful for educators who work tirelessly with the best interest of the student in mind, navigating challenging situations with nuance and grace, reaching out for support and resources, and with the ultimate goal of the student thriving in class and at home. It is your responsibility as a board to pass this policy, comply with the law, trust educators, and protect students. A lot of the concerns brought up so far this night are about the laws that exist. It's not really up to you whether you're going to follow the law or not. When you're talking about access to bathrooms, locker rooms, or field trip accommodations, New Jersey's law against discrimination, which has protected on the basis of gender identity since 2007, is very clear, and the Office of Civil Rights spells it out. That students, all people in all of New Jersey, in public spaces, including school accommodations, are able to access gender-segregated facilities in accordance with their gender identity. That's the law. You cannot choose to do something else. You're asking to be sued, which I don't think any of your taxpayers want. I'm happy to provide more resources or answer any other questions about the law and what this means. The guidance is guidance that explains the interpretation of the law. So if you do not comply with the guidance, you are not complying with what New Jersey has said the law means. So if you are sued, you will lose, because this is what the state of New Jersey has said this law means. If you don't pass this policy, your current policy is in violation of the new guidance, and so you're left open to that as well. So again, happy to answer any questions, but that's information about it. Thanks.
Climb the trees, Sherman Ridge, Wantage. I'm here actually on the, to help request, Mrs. Anderson and I have spoken a few times. She has requested a second nurse to attend this year's 8th grade field trip due to the large number of medical concerns with the students of this particular 8th grade class.
I don't want to cut you off. It's not on this agenda,
But
but
it
it's
is
being...
because it's part of the people who are being approved for the 8th grade field trip. There's only one nurse currently approved.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, behind the scenes, it's being worked out with a substitute. So we're in
Okay.
the process of finalizing that for the next agenda.
On the budget, they can do it.
Okay, well, we've been asking and no one's been telling. So and I even called the office and asked about it today, and they told me they didn't have an answer for me.
Which office?
Yours.
Okay, I didn't get that message, but I'm happy to talk to you about it, but there will be a second nurse.
Okay, then I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the students count.
Wantage. So we to understand from what the speaker from Vernon has just shared, that the very freedoms that she and her family exercise to help guide their own child on their journey, and the very same freedoms that you believe our parents should be deprived of, because a yes vote to this board policy, as it has been written, will do just that. Something's very wrong here. Our Sussex Wantage parents should have the same rights and freedom at their disposal to guide, the same rights and freedoms at their disposal to guide and assist their children. Who is a local school board to deprive our parents of their right to know? Here in Sussex Wantage, we are a small, close-knit community. We have strong, highly committed, and well-able staff of teachers, counselors, administrator, and support staff who are capable of lending support and care to students and families as they prove each and every day. Let's trust them to do their jobs and be the home, school support they have always had. In closing, please do not approve this policy as it is written. Do not deprive our parents of their right to be part of their child's life. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take a quick second shot.
If it's quick, Mr. Bell.
Apparently, what the speaker from Vernon forgets is we have a constitution that guarantees the rights. The non-transgender students have rights. If you pass this policy, you have denied them their rights under the Constitution. The law does not comply with the Constitution. That's why I said it would have to be a constitutional suit. How much money will it cost you to defend and lose a constitutional suit? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Campbell. I live in Stanhope now. I grew up in Sussex County. I just wanted to come tonight to offer my voice locally in support of Sussex County trans kids, their families, everyone who loves them and cares about them. Just affirm that they are valid and valued, and I am very happy to see that there's a policy going through that affirms that as well. As was previously stated, this is the law. Compliance with it is not optional, so I'm very happy to see this happening. And I just, I grew up in Sussex County as a cisgender heterosexual woman. I've had the pleasure and the privilege as an adult of becoming a Sussex County homeowner and getting to know Sussex County transgender folks, their families, and I know there are many more that I don't know that don't feel safe living openly, and that's very unfortunate. But accepting everyone, those I've met, those I'm directly impacted by, those I'm not, costs me nothing. It has diminished none of my rights. So I just want to put it out there that I understand everyone's concerns about being informed of what's going on with their children, of course. But I also remember what it was like to be a young person and to go through things that I wasn't comfortable sharing with my family first. I know that happens with other people, and I'm very happy to see that there's a policy going through that makes the school a safe space where they can come for help that they might not be able to get at home first. It would be great if everyone could get that help at home first. It's just not the reality for far too many, so I'm very grateful for this policy and to the board for doing the work that you need to do to be in compliance with the law. Thank you.
Gorman, I live in Wantage. I would like to talk about the current policy that's being proposed and the lack of family input. According to a 2016 study published by the LGBTQ Health, family rejection increases the odds of substance abuse and suicide attempts in transgender and gender nonconforming people. Research through the Family Acceptance Project found that LGBTQ youth whose families affirm their gender identity are almost 50% less likely to make a suicide attempt. Research has acknowledged the importance of parental support. Families are motivated when they realize that their words and actions have a powerful impact on LGBTQ survival. Supportive family structures have led to a decrease in suicide and drug abuse and help protect against health risks such as HIV and other STIs. Through education and peer support, families can help promote the well-being of LGBTQ youth. As the proposed guidelines state, the school district should make every effort to ensure any disclosures made in a way that reduces or eliminates the risk of redisclosure and protects the transgender student from further harassments. Those measures may include the facilitation of counseling for the student and the student's family to facilitate the family's acceptance and support of the student's transgender status. I find it absurd that some of the members of the board are trying to eliminate families from the education and from the equation when multiple studies indicate that family structure is a key component to LGBTQ youth success. Our students need to feel safe and supported at school and at home. The board should be working on ways to maintain positive family involvement, not eliminate it. Since some members of the board are against family involvement, I ask, what does the school currently have in place to help these children? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the board secretary certification.
Pursuant to NJAC 6A.23A-16.1C3, I certify that as of February 28, 2019, no line item account has encumbrances and expenditures which in total exceed the line item appropriation in violation of NJAC 6A.23A-16.1.
We'll move on to the approval of board minutes for January 30th, 2019, regular and executive session. Looking for a motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Van Zandt?
Yes.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig? Yes. Mrs. Fields? Mr. Hyden? Mrs. Steele? Yes. Mrs. Stoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitty? Yes. Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, please.
We move on to the presentation of agenda items. Under there's no executive session.
Under personnel, I'd like to move items 1 through 16.
I'll make that motion.
Discussion?
I already discussed this with Mr. Gall, but I need to be assured that only one administrator will be traveling on the trip.
So on number 7, we're currently asking Mr. Schwartz and Mr. Linsky to be approved as administrators on the Washington DC trip to give me the flexibility. If one can't make it, I can automatically fill in with the other one. At this juncture, it would be Mr. Schwartz because he's had experience going on the trip.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
And to clarify, just again, I do anticipate a second nurse going on the trip. The person's not a consistent employee here, it's a substitute, so we're working that out financially behind the scenes. Yeah.
That's it, thank you.
And I know I discussed this with you too, Mr. Gall, with the parent chaplains. Is there a cost for them? I know they're gonna pay a little bit more, correct?
I believe they paid the full amount without the fundraising.
Anyone else? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Fields?
Yes.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Zandt?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitty?
Yes.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Under policy, I'd like to move items 1 through 3.
Any motion? Discussion?
Calendar.
Okay.
After 3 days, how many hours of PD will be faculty get? After all the kids are gone, how long is the PD?
Mr. Higgins, you have a number on that?
Yes, it's, looking under 2 hours, so it's about 1:45 to 3:40.
I'm just wondering if having 1 full PD day would be better than 2 half days, kind of a childcare stuff that, I just don't know if it's really valuable to have 2.5 hours of PD and then just having 1 full PD. Because after all the kids are gone, by the time they get settled, I've been burnt myself, I don't find it very valuable. I should be.
I mean, we can always reflect on it, take a second look at it.
Any other discussion on policies, item 1 through 3?
With regards to the policy that's been discussed, the transgender student policy, I think a lot of the confusion keeps coming around by what's legal and what's mandatory. And, I want to say that I have an issue with the way the policy was presented from Strauss Esme. For them indicating that it's mandatory, that was a shock to most of the board. And then with the email that Jenny sent out, it says whether or not your district adopts a policy on transgender students, they are bound by the NJDOE. I don't think anybody, well, I know that it's still confusing. So from what I want to say is that here it's saying that the policy itself is not mandated also. So, I don't know what people's thoughts.
Well, if I could have a minute, please. You're right, Ken, the policy is not mandated. There are plenty of districts around the state that don't have a policy. The conundrum we're in is that we already have a policy from 2015. Our policy no longer fits the language of the law. It's not a personal agenda. It's not any of that. It doesn't fit the policy of the law. So if I could ask Mr. Jacoby, we cannot resort back to 2015's policy because it's no longer up to snuff. We'd have to rescind it.
Let me address a couple things. So, the New Jersey, there's a lot of laws that apply, that are mandatory. The New Jersey law against discrimination is mandatory. You cannot discriminate against LGBTQ, heterosexual, people of their religious beliefs. It's a broad, encompassing law, and it's there to protect everyone's rights, not just one group, but everyone's rights. That's mandatory. Another mandatory law, there's millions of mandatory laws. The Fair Labor Standards Act that governs wage and hour, mandatory. Harassment, intimidation, and bullying, mandatory. That's designed to protect students. It's basically taking the New Jersey law against discrimination and bringing it down to the classroom. The New Jersey law against discrimination, when that was passed, it was really for the workplace where adults could get along. Well, then they realized that they were trying to apply the New Jersey law against discrimination to students, and then they created the harassment, intimidation, and bullying law that really defines a lot of other things, different characteristics, etc. It's even a little broader. All these laws are designed to assist kids, and I think people are making leaps thinking that the policy is not the law. There are mandated policies that you have to pass, and so one of them, the harassment, intimidation, and bullying law, mandates that districts have a policy. So this board has no discretion about having that HIB policy. You have to have it. And there's a number of policies that are mandated. There's 2 companies in New Jersey that draft policies. One of them is New Jersey School Boards, and the other one is Strauss Esme. And you guys deal with Strauss Esme. Strauss Esme gave you a policy that they indicated was mandatory. Let me be clear. Having a transgender policy is not mandatory. As the board attorney, do I recommend that you have a transgender policy? Absolutely. Why? Because most people in their homes don't have a bookcase full of all the laws. Most people don't have a copy of the New Jersey law against discrimination and all the nuances and the regulations built in. Most people don't have the law, the HIB law, sitting on their bookcase. They're complicated laws. The regulations are super complicated. So the reason that boards have policies is that it basically digests the law. It gives the essence of what people's rights are and the way you treat people. So, do I think that even though it's not mandatory to have a transgender policy, do I think you should have one? I do. And I think that it's important to have it so that students who are transgender can look at the policy and say, okay, I have rights. Parents can look at it, whether you have a transgender kid or not. Staff members can look at it. Administration can look at it. And so, just so we're clear, and Ms. Craig is right, the policy that you have in place right now that was passed in 2015 is not in compliance. So if you don't pass this policy this evening, I'm going to recommend that you make a motion this evening from the floor to suspend your current policy. And then you can draft a policy that addresses a lot of the concerns you've heard here this evening. There's constitutional issues, there's privacy issues, there's all that. But understand the other thing is the new policy that came out from Strauss Esme, and New Jersey School Boards has a similar one, it's a little different, but it's similar. They've both codified, or they've put in the policy, the guidance from the New Jersey Department of Education. So let me just be clear. Guidance is not law. Guidance is the guidance of what they're recommending, how to treat it so you don't violate it. So whether you have a policy or not, let's just be clear. And the board has to comply with the laws, but it's really not the board. You're not running the schools, you just make sure they're well run. The person who runs the schools is this guy sitting to my right. Yeah, my right. Your left. He runs the schools. He's got to make sure that they're run and run well. He's got to make sure, and it's his staff, and you've got really gifted, talented staff members who are professionals. They're certificated. They're not allowed to be in a school unless they're certificated as professionals. And so they're going to have to, they know the students, and they know the students' families, and they make lots of judgment calls every day of the week. Judgment calls that none of you guys know about, whether or not to call DCP&P, formerly known as DIFUS. There's a lot of tough decisions that these folks have to make on a day-to-day basis. So having a policy helps them look at it, have a dialogue with Mike, have a dialogue with the director of guidance, whatever they need to do to formulate how to deal with certain situations. And every situation is unique, and every family is unique, and every kid is unique. So I think it's imperative that ultimately you guys come up with a policy that addresses transgender. Now let's talk about the guidance. The guidance, and I know that people are upset with the guidance that was put out by the Department of Education. Some people like it, some people don't like it. That's okay. There's lots of laws out there that I'm not too crazy about, but I gotta comply with them. Not a real big fan of the speed limits on 823. I got it. A few times I haven't complied with them, but I found out about it. But the guidance, so there's a guy that's sitting to my right, and he's the superintendent of schools. And he reports to a guy called, or actually a female in Sussex, called the Executive County Superintendent of Schools. And the Executive County Superintendent of Schools reports to this gentleman down in Trenton called the Commissioner of Education. And so when they put out guidelines and guidance, Mike Gall and his staff can't say, we're not going to follow that guidance. You guys have to trust that you hired the right people. Mike Gall, your staff. And you guys have I negotiate against your staff. They're pretty good people. Except for one. I'm just teasing. She's looking at me. But you have to have trust in your staff that when they have guidelines, they're making these tough decisions. If a kid comes to them and says, I'm having issues with my sexual orientation, my sexuality, my gender identity, what do? It's not these board members that are making the calls at all. It's Mike and his team that are working with the student, working with the family, working with the counselors. How do we address it with the parents, etc. Parents should clearly be involved. And I think that everyone has said that having family involvement and acceptance is important for children that are LGBTQ. It's important for literally every kid. But kids are going through tough issues. If you have a kid who's got mental illness, it's an important issue. And so I think that ultimately we have to remember it's your staff that are going to be making the decisions. And you hired the staff, these professionals. When you go to the doctor and ask for a diagnosis, you're going there because they're a professional and they're making a judgment call. Well, these folks are making the same types of judgment calls every day with your kids. And guess what? They probably spend, during the school year, more time with your kids than the parents spend. So they're making a lot of judgment calls. So if you don't pass this policy tonight, and I understand that there's issues with it, I think what I would recommend is, A, you have to suspend tonight the policy that's in place, because I don't want people following it where it is contrary to guidance and not up to snuff. And people have to understand too, policies change a lot because there are cases that come out. So you have a statute, like the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, or HIV, and then over time, courts issue decisions on things. And certain courts issue decisions and guidance that ultimately find their way into policies. So I'll give you an example, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. So in our country, the highest court of the land is the U.S. Supreme Court. In this area, the court right below the U.S. Supreme Court is the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. They have decisions on student privacy rights. So your policy, and I think some of the guidance that the DOE put out, is trying to reflect the Third Circuit guidance. That's okay. So I think what I would suggest that we do is, if you don't pass this policy tonight, I do think you need to have a policy. Not that it means that if you don't, you can't say we're not complying with the laws. You have to comply with the laws. Transgender students have rights to the use of the restrooms, etc. You can't ignore that, and if you do, you're going to expose yourself to great liability. So that would be very foolish. Do I think that we can, ultimately, if you don't pass it, you suspend the policy that you have in place tonight so that no one has a misguided belief in it, and then we go back to Strauss Esme, who drafted the policy, and we can work with school boards and say, guys, these are some of the concerns, because you have people, involving, because when you read the policy, what Strauss Esme put out, saying it was mandatory, it appears that parents don't have any rights, and I get it. But at the same time, individual students, you have to remember, one gentleman was talking about the Constitution, and it's right. All men are created equal. It's really all men and women are created equal. And we all have unalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Everyone. And guess what? That includes kids. So kids do have rights. They do have privacy rights. So this is a difficult area. It's a difficult area that a lot of folks are grappling with. And so if you don't do it, I think you go back to Strauss Esme, that you guys pay a fee to every year. It's a pretty good gig. They write your policies and they get paid thousands of dollars every year to do policies. You go back and say, craft a policy that complies with the law, that captures what we need to do for our transgender community, but at the same time doesn't appear to, and frankly, at the end of the day, whether you have a policy or not, that guidance has to be followed by your staff. That's the reality. Mike Gall can't say, you know what, Commissioner, I think your guidance stinks. Well, that's not going to be real good for Mike Gall in his career. It doesn't work like that. And guidance, just so folks know, guidance changes. Guidance changes all the time. And why does guidance change? Because court cases come out, things happen, other laws get passed, maybe there's a federal law. It's an evolving, difficult process. So I think that everyone is well-intentioned. I don't think anyone wants to discriminate against anybody. Whether you're LGBTQ or heterosexual, that's, I don't think, the goal of the board or this administration. I think the goal of this board and this administration is you want to get a policy that provides appropriate guidance, that gives folks kind of a broad brushstroke of what the rights are. Because let me be real clear. The transgender policy, the one that you are considering tonight, the one that you have, doesn't encompass everything. It basically touches on it, and then it cites some laws. If you ever look at the bottom of the policy, it cites laws and regulations, so that people can go and look at the laws and regulations. But guess what? Even the laws and regulations that your policies are citing, it doesn't cite all the laws. I don't see any cites to federal law in there. Well, guess what? There's a whole body of federal law that has rights. It doesn't cite the Constitution, as the gentleman said, and you do have rights under all the different amendments of the U.S. Constitution. So a policy is really just guidance. It's a quick place where parents, staff members, students can go look and say, oh, okay, this is addressed here. And I think it's important. And folks, I know that people have talked about the field trip, etc. Guess what? When kids go on a field trip, you go on a field trip. Whether you go to Stokes or you go to DC or whatever, all these laws apply. Bullying applies, New Jersey law against discrimination applies. It's not like you say, we're going on a field trip, and now that we're down in DC, the New Jersey law against discrimination is suspended. It's not. And that's why you have all these staff members going on these trips. You have professionals going with these kids to chaperone them, to make sure that they don't violate HIV, that they don't violate kids' rights, that you have nurses so that the kids are safe, that they're administering medicine. It's a complicated process. So I think that folks tonight should understand that my recommendation, and my firm's recommendation is, you should have a policy. Whether it's this policy or this policy refined some way, there should be a policy. And I think that Strauss Esme, who drafted it, we should go back to them and say, we want you to look at it if it's open on test. Second, you need to suspend the current policy regardless of what you do, because it is not compliant. And third, my recommendation is that you ultimately need to have a policy. Although they said it was mandatory and it's not, I think that it's helpful for people to have a policy so that they understand, whether it's the students, the parents, the staff, or your administration, generally, what are the rights? Something where it's encapsulated in a few pages. So that's really my position this evening on this issue, and I think that you'll get it right. And this is something that a year from now, 2 years from now, they'll be revisiting because there'll be new laws, new changes, etc. So I hope that answers your questions. And we'll be glad to work. We didn't draft the policy, that was us, but I'll be glad, and my partner Mark will be glad to work with the attorneys at Strauss Esme, and we also do a lot of work with school boards. We talk to school boards and have a dialogue so that you know, ultimately you guys have a policy that is acceptable to all. And not everyone will be happy. That's okay. Not everyone has to be happy, but to have a policy, I'm sure there's a lot of laws out there that people aren't happy with. You know, right now they're talking about passing marijuana. That's a pretty hot debate. Some people are happy with it, some people aren't happy with it. But if it's a law, it's a law. So not everyone's going to be happy with it, but I think the folks in this community have to understand, this board didn't pass the laws. This board didn't create the guidance. They're passing a policy that tries to capture how to give your staff the guidance they need when dealing with these very, very difficult issues. And I think that we should all, you should all be very thankful, because you do have a very caring staff that looks at these kids and tries to guide them and help them through it, through all these issues. And I think that that's what you're going to be doing. What you're really doing is you're arming your staff to help them.
So in your own words, you
Sir,
would not vote yes on the policy.
Sir, I'm not having a dialogue with you. I'm just talking.
Your own words, you said
that
both policies are not right. So let's vote on a proper policy.
So
take our time and vote.
So I'm not going to engage in a dialogue. Sir, you're out of order. The public comment is closed. The public comment was open, now it's closed, and I'm explaining. The policy that's presently written has created issues. Do I think that the policy that's on thing is illegal? No, your Strauss Esme wrote it, school board says so. They're not illegal. They codified this guidance. So we can go back and talk to them. What I will say that's inappropriate is the policy that you have on your books right now is not in compliance. So that would need to be suspended. And you can do that tonight. To revoke a policy, you need to have a first and second reading. So you can't do it tonight, it's not even on your agenda. But at least tonight you would do it from the floor. We'll do a motion to suspend your current policy, because I don't want staff members, and Mike Gall is fully familiar with the guidance, fully familiar with the laws, you know, and can provide guidance to his staff on how to deal with these issues. When these issues come up, these are not issues where Mike Gall says, forget it, just go handle it yourself. These are serious discussions that Mike and his team have in dealing with these issues. So people shouldn't walk away from here saying that people's rights are going to be trampled. They're not going to be trampled. Mike is fully familiar, fully vetted, fully capable of helping these students through these difficult issues. and families. And I think that at the end of the day, people have said it, acceptance of these students, ultimately by their families, is a huge issue. So whether they come to a staff member privately and say something in confidence, ultimately the staff is going to have to be working with that student to get their family involved so that there is acceptance. And ultimately, if the staff believes that a child is going to be harmed or is being harmed because of this, guess what? The staff makes another very tough call. It's called calling DCP&P. They have to do it immediately. And if they don't, if a staff member believes that a child is in harm's way or has been harmed, and they don't call DCP&P, the staff member's committed a crime.
Yep.
So they are obligated to call. So these are all tough issues that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I'm not on the policy committee, and I'm not really aware of how this develops, but I understand that we have to update our policies to be in compliance with the law. Are there pieces to the policy that we're looking into tonight that were optional?
Well, the whole so I think what happened is that
You know how they come out with the guideline, it says you have to select certain things and not select other things. Well, certain things selected that.
I don't want to speak to that. What I can tell you is my understanding of what occurred is that Strauss Esme sent Michael a policy and indicated that this is a mandatory policy. And once it's mandatory,
In the discussion, was there any alterations made to this?
I understand there were some minor alterations.
There was no alterations.
Overnight trips.
Yes.
But guess what? The reality is that frankly, when Mike called me up and said that, I'll tell you, my impression is if you have a field trip policy that covers all your field trips, whether they're overnight or not. You might want to put in that policy all the other board policies apply when you're on a field trip. So it's more encompassing because the HIV, etc. So you could actually kind of, if you have a transgender policy and you have an HIV policy and you have a New Jersey law against discrimination policy and you have a field trip policy, if the field trip policy says all these other policies apply, then it's more of a catch-all. So that's something you guys could ultimately consider. But I think that what the confusion is when we got a phone call, right, I would think it was maybe the day of your last meeting, or it was within 24 hours. Is this a mandatory policy? We went and looked and we said, no, it's, we said it's not mandatory. But I will tell you that whether it's mandatory or not, I definitely recommend it.
Well, we have the one from 2015 that we put in.
Yeah, obviously you put it in because
we're following that.
Yeah.
So.
But you need to suspend that because there's portions of it that are in compliance with the DOE guidelines.
It's not compliant, so we would have to walk that back, but I have a question for Matt. So, and I understand what Mr. Hayden was saying, and I appreciate that. When it comes to, which seems to be the hot button topic, which I think it's being spun through the media and through social media, is this parental consent. Nobody has ever said at any time that we don't want parental involvement. But if we were to take our old policy, which says the parental consent with a letter, and we take our new policy, which now says that you protect the student's rights if they come through in confidentiality, could we write a new policy that says a parental note, or is that not compliant with the law?
No, I would say that a parental note is not in compliance with the law, definitely not in compliance with the guidelines. I think that what you'd ultimately want to do, and we'll work with Strauss Esme, is address the issue that students have privacy rights. And if they're confiding in, if a student goes to a psychologist and says something, the psychologist can't go and tell the mom and dad about it. If a student's going to a guidance counselor who's the school psychologist, there's privacy issues there. So it's complicated. However, I think that people have the impression that the policy that's being considered takes away parents' rights, and I don't think that is what this board wants. I don't think that's what the law was intended, because ultimately, they're your kids. I have 4 kids. I want to know if my child is having issues or not, so that I can help support them. But at the same time, and some speakers said, there are certain parents that are not supportive of this, or supportive of other things. I mean, there's a whole host of things. That's why you have professionals that have to make those decisions. And they have to make the judgment calls. And if they don't if Mike Gall is not making the right judgment calls, then guess what your job is? Is this job's board to say bye-bye. And if Mike Gall has, if Mike Gall has a staff member who's making bad judgment calls, then it's Mike Gall's job to say, we need to do something about the staff. So there's a lot of safeties here in place for this issue. And I think that everyone's comments are well received. I think the people that are supportive of the LGBT community, I agree with you. These folks need to be supported. The folks that are talking about parental rights, they're right. They have a right to parent their child and help guide them. And ultimately, you have staff members here who have to balance both of those issues. They have to balance the issues, and I think that, and I actually called Phil Nicastro after the last meeting, we talked to him, and with the guidance talked about the health and safety, welfare, and so, you know, his impression, because he was in this group meeting when they came up with this guidance, was they don't want to take away parents' rights. I don't know if it's worded exactly or as succinctly as it could be put, but I think there's a whole balancing act here. And just so we're clear, at the end of the day, that guidance that the DOE put out, whether you have it in your policy or not, Mike Gall and his staff aren't going to ignore that guidance. They're going to follow it because his boss is saying you have to do it.
Is that piece about parental guidance one of the alterations that was made during the discussion of the policy?
No.
Can it be eliminated and the child's rights will still remain the same?
I want to talk to, because we got into this literally about 12 hours before you had your first reading. So I wasn't part of this working group, wasn't invited to it. You know, they don't like me, so I wasn't invited. So, but they had a working group of a lot of people, the DOE, etc. So there was a working group that came up with the guidelines. So I think what prompted the policy revision from 2015 to 2019 was the guidance that the DOE put out. Both school boards and Strauss Esme put out revised policies to reflect this guidance. So the issue about the that was done by Strauss Esme. The way that was drafted, that was Strauss Esme. That wasn't changed here at all. And I think that the folks here that had the M on it are mandatory, so they said, okay, it's mandatory, we have to do it. And we've confirmed that it's not mandatory, it's highly recommended. But you know, it's something that ultimately, if you don't pass it, we can talk to Phil Nicastro and have them draft a policy that is compliant with law, compliant with the guidelines, but you know, reflects both the students' rights of privacy and the parents' rights to, you know, be informed of what's going on in their students' lives, their child's lives.
Can we see New Jersey School Board's version of that?
I actually provided a copy of New Jersey, so when this all broke, I got a copy of New Jersey School Board's policy. And it was sent to you guys because I got a copy.
Okay, so I'm going to raise my hand now. Couple times here. What happens when, and you might not know, but if a teacher were to have to feel they have to call DCP and P because they couldn't contact the parent, from DCP and P's side, aren't they going to be contacting the parent?
Well, they would go, calling DCP, you only call.
If they felt the child was.
So they call, so staff members are required to notify DCP
Right.
if they have reasonable suspicion that the child is being abused and or neglected.
So we're assuming that they're just saying that if they were to come out.
No, if they, for example, if some kid said, you know, I tried to tell my parents I was coming out and my father beat me up last night, if that was said to a staff member,
Right.
the next thing they do is they call DCP and P.
And then they're going to go straight to the parent.
Yeah, protective services come out and a whole host of things happen. a whole host of things happen, and the staff member is immune from liability. So if the staff member has a reasonable suspicion that a child is in harm's way from a parent and doesn't call DCP&P, that's a criminal act on the staff member. But if they contact DCP&P, they're immune. The parent can say, I'm going to sue the staff member. Good luck, you can't. And the whole goal is that the law is there to protect kids from being abused and or neglected. So if that situation comes up, but I think you guys have very gifted staff members who have, you know, just when you're hanging out at these awards this night, you can tell how the staff interacts with these kids and giving them high fives. You have to trust the staff members that they're going to have these dialogues with these students, and then try to involve their families. If the kid's saying, I haven't told my parents, or whatever, you hired a very gifted group of professionals. You have to trust them. Just like when you go to your doctor, you trust them. Or you go to your dentist, they have a drill in your mouth, you trust them. You have to trust these people that they're guiding your children and their students in the most appropriate fashion, given all the unique circumstances that they're privy to that none of us probably are, in terms of that student, their parents, what their parents are all about, do they have other siblings? I mean, there's a whole host of things. And they have other staff members they can talk to. Hey, I have a situation with Johnny. You had Johnny last year. You know, that's why you have staff, and they have Mike Ball and his team and the principals to help guide them.
I just want to make something clear. If we vote this transgender down tonight, we all say no, or the majority say no, we take away our old policy. So we will have no policy in place at that point, correct? So then Mr. Gall would have to follow the rules of the law, what the law says, correct?
Absolutely.
To protect us and our schools
And
our students.
Whether you have this policy or not, the rights of LGBTQ children are the same. Whether you have a policy or not, whether you have this policy or another policy or no policy, they have all rights. So what you do is Mr. Gall and his staff are going to have to, without the policy, they're still going to have to comply with the law. And they have guidance that the DOE put out. Mike Gall got a copy of this guy. This isn't guidance that was like top secret. So they're going to look at the guidance, they're going to talk, and Mike has resources. So if Mike is in a difficult situation, he can go to the executive county superintendent and say, hey, listen, we have this issue, we need guidance. And the executive county superintendent can go to the commissioner's office, and they have a whole team of lawyers called deputy attorney generals that work there. So there's lots of layers that you have resources. But whether you have this policy or not, you're complying with the law, you have to, and you can't violate anyone's rights, including LGBTQ students. So, but I think that it's important that if this policy doesn't pass tonight, you suspend your current policy so that you don't have a staff member erroneously, you know, the kid comes in and says, by the way, I'm gay, and I want to change my name from male to female. Listen, you have to go home and get a written permission slip from your parents. That's not compliant with the law, so we don't want a staff member to accidentally rely on a policy that is not up to date.
I just wanted to clarify that was it. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Ranzan?
Yes.
Mrs. Fields?
Yes on everything, but on 3B, I'm going to say no.
Mr. Harden?
Yes on everything, and I think there needs to be further discussion on 3B. I'm going to vote no on 3B.
Mr. Nuss?
Same yes for everything with exception of 3B, which would be no.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoll?
Yes to everything except 3B, which we discussed. So it would be enough.
Mrs. Whitty?
Yes to all except for 3B.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes to everything except for 3B, which will be a no.
Okay, so everything passed except for the transgender policy. So, again, I think it's imperative that the board do two things. Right now, tonight, I think we should do a resolution immediately suspending, and I have a draft resolution, I'm gonna read it, so just so you guys can hear it. The rest, I don't know, you can figure out what number, Christine. Okay, whereas the Sussex Wantage Regional Board of Education is in the process of reviewing District Policy 5756 on transgender students, which was adopted on October 21st, 2015. And whereas the Board of Education is in the process of reviewing and considering a substantial revision to District Policy 5756 in response to the issuance of a transgender student guidance for school districts by the New Jersey Department of Education. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to suspend current District Policy 5756 adopted on October 21st, 2015 from its policy manual until further action is taken by the Board of Education. And whereas during the period of suspension, the Board of Education shall adhere to all applicable laws and agency guidance concerning transgender students. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby suspends application of District Policy 5756 adopted on October 21st, 2015 from its policy manual until further action is taken from the Board, and further resolves that the Board of Education and its staff shall adhere to all applicable laws and agency guidance concerning transgender students. So that's the motion.
Thank you, looking for a motion.
You need a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Mrs. Fall?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig? Mrs. Fields?
Yes.
Mr. Heiden?
Yes.
Mrs. Ranjan? Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitty?
Yes.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And just before we move on to the rest of it, I just want to, with the board's permission and my call, what we'll do is we'll reach out to Strauss Esme, we'll talk to school boards, we'll talk it so that you guys can have a policy that goes to your policy committee that addresses these different issues for your consideration.
While we're talking about you reaching out to them, is it possible to get a presentation from school boards to see what they offer? Because I'm still like.
Well, that's something, yeah, that's something you can work with
You
Mr.
know,
Call.
business?
What?
No.
Yeah, no.
No, I think I know that Vernon went to school boards, they left Strauss Esme and they went back to Strauss Esme.
If they didn't present this way,
I know.
I would have, you know what I'm saying?
I know.
I just feel like it was not presented properly.
With
And
their
I don't know-
interpretation, so.
It's their sure,
Yes.
but it's misrepresentation to every school board that is getting this from Strauss Esme. I mean, every board might say that it's mandatory and just pass it because they assume it's mandatory.
Well, I mean, let's just, I mean, I think that it, I'm not gonna defend them, because I don't work for them, but,
Wasn't it a misunderstanding that it was mandated, and maybe I'm wrong, so I'm not,
well,
it was
explain to you.
mandated because we had a policy in place, so
I don't know if
therefore it was
that's the
put
case.
down as
I think
mandated,
we
is the way I
actually,
understood it
staff
in my
mem-
conversation.
my colleagues talked to folks at Strauss Esme. I think that the confusion is that there are mandatory laws that deal with transgender. And so when you have mandatory laws that deal with transgender, LGBTQ, community, you're mandated to follow. New Jersey law against discrimination, HIB, all those things. So I think that it would be foolish, very, very foolish, to not have a comprehensive policy. And so I think that that's why I don't know why they said mandatory or not. If you called school boards, which I did, are you advertising this as mandatory? They said, no, we're not. Highly recommended, but not mandatory. And usually when you see mandatory, just so we're clear, very often the law itself, like HIB is one where it says districts shall have a policy. I mean, there was no discretion at all. So, but I don't want people to think that if we don't have this policy, we can do something differently with, you can't. All the other laws are mandatory, so.
At least we question all the other policies we have.
No, I think that what's kind of interesting is representing a number of districts. You know, I'll go to their policies now online. Some districts are easier to find others. But you go to one policy and it's a Strauss Esme policy, and then you go to school boards, and they're not that dissimilar. I'm wondering like who's plagiarizing who. But they, you know, they are reflective of the laws. They have people, that, all their job, frankly, is just to follow the laws and regulations that deal with schools and come up with policies. So it's a valuable service because your staff, and they do it for so many school boards, they do it on a much more cost-effective basis. Your staff doesn't have time to sit there with the legislation and see, I mean, if you saw the amount of legislation that comes out of Trenton every couple of weeks, it's incredible. So that's all they do is they get tagged every school-related item that comes up. They're also tracking federal court decisions, state court decisions, agency decisions, and then they're taking them and putting them into policies. So it is important, but I think you guys could easily have a presentation. You know, you have to arrange it, but I've seen school boards come out and do presentations on it as well.
Thank you. So one last question, sorry. Just so we're clear, when we all go home tonight, exactly as it says is exactly what the administration is going to be following because it's the law. Am I correct in that, Mr. Jacoby?
Well,
We still have to follow all those guidelines because it's the law.
No, the guidelines are not law.
Right.
Not law at all.
Right.
The guidelines, though, are put out by the New Jersey Department of Education. So, for example, the New Jersey Department of Education puts out guidelines, they put it out about park. This is give you a perfect example. There's a court challenge to it, and as you know, my daughter's one of those ones that are gonna have to take the park test, because she's a 10th grader, but it was challenged, it was overturned. So guidelines can be overturned, they have to comply with, and when they put out guidelines or regulations, they have to be consistent with the law. So my point to you is that when we all go home here this evening, Mike Gall and his staff have to comply with the guidelines that are put out by the DOE. They can't ignore them. That's who they ultimately report to. As you know, when you approved Mike Gall's contract, before you voted on it, it had to be reviewed by the Executive County Superintendent. And guess what? The Executive County Superintendent has guidelines that are put out by the DOE. When Mike Gall has miracles, before you vote on them, they have to be approved. So there's a lot of people that Mike Gall ultimately, you know, he reports to you as the board, you're his employer, but he also has to follow that guidance. So, just so folks know tonight, it's not Mike Gall's ripping up these guidelines, they're gonna follow these guidelines, but folks have to have faith in your staff that they understand what the kids' rights are and what the parents' rights are when they're making these very, very, you know, difficult decisions on a daily basis. Not just with this, with lots of stuff.
Thank you.
And I don't know if it gives anybody comfort, not that it couldn't happen, but for all the situations I'm aware of where this policy has been applied, there's never been a circumstance in a district where parents weren't engaged in the process. Under finance, I'd like to move items 1 through 11.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Field?
Yes.
Ms. Van Zandt?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele? Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Bibby?
Yes.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Under special services, I'd like to move items 1 through 3.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Van Zandt?
Yes.
Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Field?
Yes.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele? Yes. Mrs. Bibby? Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Under curriculum, I'd like to move item number 1.
Make a motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Mrs. Field?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Ms. Van Zandt?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele? Yes. Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Bibby? Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
At this point, we'll move on to unfinished business. Does anyone on the board have some unfinished business?
Well, I would like to make a point, and get everyone's thought officially, is to look into two boards. What's everyone think?
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's good. I think we should look into whatever is beneficial for the community.
Might be a good time to.
And you guys, we did circulate that policy for school boards, so you might want to just take a look at that. That's one policy you guys can look at and say, hey, we like how they drafted this. I have a copy of it right here. You guys just can take a look at it, Mike can send it around to you guys again. And it's a very, very comprehensive policy. That deals with, it incorporates harassment, intimidation, and bullying. So it just gives you an idea of a comparison against these. I don't know what your contract is with Strauss Esme. I don't know if it's usually a yearly contract, but, and I don't know the costs of it. But that's something that you guys can do. Yeah.
Secondly, somebody, I think it was Darrell, brought it up. When we come up with a policy, how are we going to roll it out so that the parents, I think it's something that we need to think about, because just like he said, you know, he wants to be prepared on how to know how the school's gonna be handling it. We're gonna be teaching, having to come up with educational programs in the future. Like, I think the board needs to come up, like,
Well, there's new law, there's a new law that was recently passed that deals with, what has to be educated in the classroom about transgender.
Right, but how do we
I think in the
roll that
most
out to
basic
the-
form, and people start opering things and stuff like that, but for policies that are being considered, and, I apologize for not anticipating this one, but we keep a binder in the back with the updates. It's just such a routine process that nobody has ever really investigated that, so we can make it more fluid in the back with the other documents that we give out from time to time, but I think it's also, maybe bring to the community outreach committee.
Right.
Probably
that's
a great job for them.
But I think what you're specifically saying is the curriculum for the
And how are the
LGBT.
parents, how is the community, I think the community needs to be involved.
Well, I think the process will be, we'll go back to Dr. Strauss Esme, you can look at school boards, talk to them, et cetera, come up with a policy that goes to the policy committee, look at that, get community outreach involved, and then you might want to, make sure when it's going to be for first reading on a board agenda, or give a heads up, we're going to have this for it, we're going to have a thing, and maybe you have somebody, whether it's school boards or Strauss Esme, come out and talk about it, have, people educated, you put it so that the members of the public can understand it. The goal here is that you don't, to understand all the facets of it, you're not gonna hire, psychologists and lawyers to come out and talk about the Constitution, but, understand it and have it. But I think if you do it in that process, where you get all the stakeholders involved and knowledgeable about what's going on, that might be helpful.
The curriculum, the curriculum for the LGBT, I think that's what you're saying.
It was two parts, so, yeah, the other part of it.
I do feel that the parents should be involved in the knowledge of it, but I'm not sure that they should be involved in the writing of the curriculum.
Oh, no, I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because that comes from the
sure,
teachers.
I think they should be, somehow they should be
Involved.
with the, educated about.
Well, yeah, they're not involved in the actual, so your staff drafts the curriculum, they work with different agencies that draft it, they have guides from the DOE on curriculum, ultimately it goes to your curriculum committee, you adopt it, but you might want to have an evening where the staff members who are teaching it, whether it's in health or whatever, put on a community forum so parents can come out and talk about it and understand it, and that's a good. Because it doesn't have to be at a board meeting, it can be kind of dedicated, an evening dedicated to that, where you have people who are experts in that area of the curriculum and have worked with the county and roundtables, et cetera, put out a presentation so that people understand what's being taught, how it's being taught, what.
We're doing those community forums, with the family nights piggybacking on PTO meetings.
So that would be a
vehicle for it.
something that people could look forward to, if we need to have something.
Were you talking like just policy specific, or were you saying all policies? Because, and I'm just asking, because all policies, and I wasn't aware of it until I started getting involved, like all policies are on the web, so that if people have, whether it's a policy about HIB or a policy about the service dogs that we voted on, they can go on,
No,
and
that's
then,
not even.
I wasn't sure if you were saying specific policy or
No, I'm talking
all
about
policies.
I'm
Because
saying.
Mike brought up the binder.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, the point that was brought up tonight was that, if the kids are gonna be taught about whatever the transgender curriculum is, we need to also involve the parents in the community, so that, like he said, when the kids come home, they're on the same page. There has to be like almost like a workshop when that curriculum comes out, so that
So that they know, that they're knowledgeable, so when their kids come home, they can have a conversation.
right, so, again, you're involving.
Before they have the actual class. We can offer it and hope that they come.
Correct, well, that's
All
what
you
I'm
can
saying.
do, all you can do is offer
You
it,
can offer it, but I
advertise
think-
it, offer it, if folks come, great, and,
Right.
and it might be helpful too, doing that, if you do have parents in the community whose kid ultimately transitions, they're having this workshop and understanding it, et cetera, they might be confronted, with the situation next year, the year after, and it might help them be more educated about the whole process. So it's not a bad idea. It's probably better not to do it at a board meeting, just
I
because
said
you got a lot more
that.
things to
Board
do.
meeting.
But
Yes.
That's a good idea. Any other unfinished business? All right, we'll move on to new business. Any new business?
I just want to thank Mr. Gregory for going to a girls' basketball team, a league game. I guess the girls are all excited. I did see it out there on social media. He is a great principal, and he does go to a lot of our children's activities after school and on his own time on the weekend. So, thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Thank you for participating.
It's a good thing we threw that other guy out.
Is there any other new business?
Hurry up to the topic.
I wanted to ask the board, I want to start the process, if possible, to do our yearly evaluation on our superintendent, Mr. Gall. I reached out to Kathy Hellowa, and she said that she would love to come out and teach the board how to use the evaluation tool so we could properly evaluate Mr. Gall. She had asked about April 3rd, which is a Wednesday night, about doing a special meeting for that purpose, open to the public. Is everyone on the board available that night? Is that 7 p.m.? Wednesday, 7, April 3rd, 7 p.m., Wednesday.
How's that gonna go? I was great and then fired me.
You're great, you're great.
You're great, Mr. Gall. Wait until the evaluation.
All right, well, if everyone
You
can
should be grateful for giving you one. Exactly.
Right.
There's a man up the road that has that in
So, if you guys wanted to check your schedule, let me know if there's any conflicts or anything. 7 p.m. And maybe that's a good, yes, maybe that's a good opportunity. I don't know if she could tell us about the policies for MSBA too.
You can have it like a half hour early or something, if everyone's interested.
You want to just make it all better?
You know what, I wanna make
We'll
it
get
a board meeting.
Mashios, we'll get Mashios to cater it.
Mashios, yeah, they have them pretty good.
Is there any other unfinished business? Or, I'm sorry, new business? All right, at this point, we'll move back on to audience remarks. Members of the audience are invited to make brief comments about items on the agenda and matters of interest to the district. Please state your name for the record.
John Nuss, 29 Newman Road. Yes, you see, when I get up here, you wonder why I'm here. My children are already through the system. I have grandchildren. What I heard tonight, I think, Toby, I really appreciate the way you explained it. But I think the biggest issue is what Mrs. Carter said, the community not being involved. This is a very touchy issue. We don't want to trample on anyone's rights. Everybody has rights, we will agree to that. But I think maybe we have to somehow get out to the parents, the taxpayers, really the parents more than the taxpayers, but get out to them with maybe a questionnaire. Talk to who's ever gonna be doing your, policy, and I mean, like you said, you go to this way, to this way. The question's out, how do parents gonna feel? I know it's gonna be something more than you might wanna even deal with getting everybody involved. But then you won't have the parents saying, hey, I didn't have a choice. A lot of them might take that paper, throw it in the garbage. The ones that are concerned are gonna bring it out. We're here tonight. There are a lot of people here that are working tonight. They can't be here, can't make the meeting. So I think you gotta get out to them with paperwork. This is not a simple policy, it's a tough policy, probably one of the toughest ones you'll see in a long time. So I think it should be handled, trying to get the community involvement. And again, some people are gonna be happy, and some people are not gonna be happy. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have a clarifying question. So the guidance has to be followed by the superintendent, correct? Okay.
I said about 4 times.
Yep, no, I just wanna, I'm not making an issue, I just want the board to be aware that the policy you just turned down is nearly word for word the guidance. So as you move forward, to be aware that the policy that you voted down, which I understand rescinding it, that's great, you're in compliance with the law, I agree with all of that. But what your superintendent and staff still has to do is exactly the policy you turned out tonight. Does that make sense? Okay,
Absolutely.
okay.
Thank you.
Bill Getmer again. Thank you for turning the policy down. Thank you for your definitions of the information. What I'm not hearing is the right of the non-transgender students. A young girl should not walk into the girls' room and find a male standing there. That is a total denial of her rights. Again, 14th Amendment reads, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. This policy is in violation of 14th Amendment. The state had no right to adopt it. The federal government had no right to adopt its policies, and I believe the Trump administration has thrown it out. Why are we pursuing this? You are denying the majority of your students their civil rights to allow a few students to have super rights. That's unconstitutional. Nothing should be done to deny the parents their information. This is all part of the progressive world government. Take the rights away from the families, give it to the government. Make the students look at the government as their family. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be brief, I promise. Hello, my name is John Harledge. My son is in the Wantage School in 3rd grade. I've been in Wantage now since 2003, so about 25 years. So I definitely have a vested interest in the community. But I'm a longtime theater and music educator, and been dealing with the age group of anywhere from 10 to 25 young people in theater and music for the better part of 21 years now. And I just wanted to reiterate Mr. Jacoby's recommendation that there does need to be a policy. My question was the timeline on when you could go back to the company that you have on tender and come up with that, if it's going to be next fall, if it's going to be by the next board meeting. So my own concern as a parent would be, when would the policy be in place? And because of Mr. Jacoby's point that the policy is important for the teachers. I've had HIV training because I was a sub for a while, and I'm looking at alternate route myself. So I am coming from a teacher's perspective. The policies are so important as a guidance for those teachers who are on the front lines of these issues when they do arise. And the other thing I wanted to say was that in a lot of schools, they do create a bathroom space, not taking away any of the current bathroom spaces. They create a new bathroom space or spaces that will fulfill, that doesn't take away from the rights of the kids who are not. So I think that issue can be easily addressed by the school board.
Cost dollars.
Okay. But maybe if I'm wrong.
It's more complicated than that, but I can't, I don't draft the policies, you have a
Exactly.
policy, so I can't give a timeline. I think that this is one that, from my perspective, shouldn't be rushed. I think that the folks said that, having the community involved in it, letting them know what things are, and educating people about what the law mandates, what the law requires. That's something that'll take some time. So I think this is a, this is going to take a lot of reflection and time, and I think that we'll have to go back to school boards, stress estimate, or if the board decides to go with school boards, if they're coming out on April 3rd, maybe they wrap that in then, and to do it. But everyone should understand that the laws haven't changed, and the laws about these rights are the laws that this board has to follow. And whether people agree with them or not, the laws are promulgated not by this board, not by these freeholders, they're promulgated by the Assembly and the Senate and signed by the governor.
Absolutely.
And they change over time. And so, and I think this is, as one gentleman just said, this is an important issue, and it's an issue that's got lots of, evokes emotions on both sides. And so I think it's got to be done very deliberately and with a lot of just education to the community, so that people understand that, this isn't the Sussex Wantage board just coming out of thin air with it. This is something that's really codifying what's out there so that the staff has guidelines. And I think Mike is going to have to work with the staff and his principals to make sure that the staff knows, and that's why they have these workshops. That's why they have the PD, so that they understand, this is how you have to deal with it. If you're confronted with this issue, this is what you do. So it's going to be a deliberative process. By the next board meeting, I don't think that's realistic.
Thank you, but I'll close with, absolutely acknowledge the rebuttal, I appreciate that, and the information. We did have a case with a student who was transgender and was in one of our productions, and in the case, so we developed quite a relationship with the student in that situation. And sometimes the only safe haven they have is with other students. In this case, yes, it was very difficult at home to share this with a parent, and it was very difficult for this particular student, and all you could do was support the student. And that's why I think, as you said, having a policy in place is very important. There are some cases where sometimes one or the other parents may not be able to be involved. And I'm just throwing it out there as having been in the experience myself. And that's it. I really appreciate the chance to say something.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry. I just want to offer one suggestion as you all move forward. In all of the discussion tonight, there's been a lot of talk about the transgender issue, the transgender policy. Please try to keep in mind, these are the transgender kids, the transgender people. It's not some separate class. These are our fellow human beings. I have been a Sussex County student, a Sussex County girl, in a Sussex County locker room. I am positive that there is not one single school board in this county that would allow men into that locker room as a matter of policy. What might happen, hopefully, if we can embrace and respect the validity of our transgender members of our community, is that there will be transgender girls in the locker room. That would be 2 girls in the locker room, no men. No one is talking about letting men into a girls' locker room anywhere. So I just want to reiterate that and just encourage everyone to keep in mind, these are not transgenders, they're transgender people and kids, and are part of our community, are part of our families, and they deserve these protections. It doesn't take away anyone else's right to give them theirs. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kevin Craig from Wantage. A couple things. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for videotaping the meetings. I'm glad that you approved that policy. I think that will give some of the community members who don't have an opportunity to come to the meetings to be able to see how the community is able to interact with the board. Maybe we'll encourage some additional participation. For future board meetings, I do have a recommendation, really based on the last meeting. The way your agenda is structured is the executive session for agenda items is like right smack in the middle of the meetings, and at the last meeting, and there's serious discussions that need to take place. I think we all understand that, and you need time to do that because and it's important that you can debate those issues. But having an hour-long executive session in the middle of the meeting, it's cumbersome for some families who who are trying to get the information, but still have other things to do and families to get home to. So maybe if there could be an adjustment where the executive session gets put either at the beginning or at the end, and then then the public can decide if there's going to be action taken after that executive session, if they'd like to stay or if they've had enough and they want to go home. So just a suggestion on that. The final note is, in 2015, this board made the proactive step of approving a transgender policy, and I applaud that. Unfortunately, tonight, I think rejecting the new policy, the updated policy that was provided by your policy provider that's consistent with the guidance from the Department of Education, I think, unfortunately, sets this district back and sets the LGBT community back in Sussex Wantage School District. So I do hope that you do make the new policy, the revision of the new policy a priority, because the kids are watching. The kids in this community are watching. And the message that's sent tonight by this board, not taking action on it, and not only not approving the policy, but rejecting the original policy, I think sends a message to the LGBT students in the school district about what the district feels about them. So hopefully moving forward, we can expedite that process and get a comprehensive policy in place to protect the students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Ashley Craig, Wantage. I just want to first state that as a member of the LGBT community myself, that I am in full support of all students and families who support their children, and all LGBT students and staff, and really anybody. I'm in support of everybody, regardless of their sexuality, race, ethnicity, religion. And I think that's what a lot of us are here for in supporting this policy. So I just want to say that first, that I support you, that if there's anything that I can do for your families or if there's any kind of support that I can offer, that I'm here for anybody. I understand the concern of the parents and the school, that the school is keeping certain information confidential. However, I wish we lived in a world, specifically I wish we lived in a Sussex County, in which every family was accepting and loving of their children regardless of who they are. I'm lucky enough to be part of a pretty amazing family that accepts me for who I am, but I know that there are many families who are unlike mine. And I can say that confidently if you go on and read newspaper articles in this town, and you read the comments. It's not a very safe feeling place to live as a member of this community. So I'm glad to see policies that were written, and I hope that we can really move forward to find a comprehensive policy that kind of is a show of faith and support to members of the LGBT community, specifically the students of these schools. I personally know children and adults who have been abused and abandoned by their families after coming out as LGBTQ, and this policy was meant to protect all children in being who they are. And with it not being passed, I do have full faith in Mr. Gall and his staff, and I know that he will continue, and he always has protected and cared for the students of his own. So I know that all the guidelines will be followed, and that their privacy rights will be protected, their safety will be protected, and they will be protected in the school and allowed to be who they want to be, which is something that I'm very happy about. I just hope that there's a policy in the near future that follows all the guidelines, and again, as a show of faith to support all students, including our LGBT students. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? All right. Seeing none, we have no need for another for any executive session. I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?